for involving me today in this fantastic initiative. I hope you can hear me well, Tim. Yeah,
Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks,
yeah.
Miriam.
Um, so, um, the outline of my talk. I have three key issues to address with my talk this morning, and hopefully I will give you some food for thought for your discussions in the breakout groups. The first point is how cities and neighborhoods have developed over the years and why. Second, how city and neighborhood planning influences how we travel. And third, the impacts of our travel behavior and why cities and neighborhoods and us need to change. Next slide, please. So let's start with the first question. How did we get here in terms of how Bristol and more in general cities and their neighborhoods have developed over time? The image on this slide, with the car occupying most of the living space in this imaginary house, I think conveys the answer perfectly. During the second half of the 20th century, cities and neighborhoods have been planned around a car, not just in Britain, really everywhere in the developed world. The movement of vehicles has been prioritized over the movement of people. This has meant catering for the growth in the number of cars by building more and more roads and parking space and implementing planning policies to accommodate more and more cars. For example, the creation of residential areas poorly served by public transport, out of town shopping and leisure centers, and the location of essential services such as hospitals in places that are accessible only or most conveniently by car. Next slide, please. So you might recognize these two images. They are both of the M32. The first one on the left-hand side is when the motorway was built, and then the other one from more recent times. Um, it shows you what happens when you build cities and roads for vehicles. They will fill up with vehicles. Next slide, please. Planning cities and neighborhoods around a car meant that people, I mean us, have become trapped in a vicious cycle of what researchers in my field call car dependence. And this allows me to address the second point of my talk, which is about how the way we travel is influenced by city and neighborhood planning and design. Obviously, our travel behavior depends on our personal characteristics, our needs and preferences, but it's also very much influenced by the external context and society in which we live. For example, where the things we want to do or places we want to go to are located, whether there are good bus services to get there, cycle tracks, decent pavements, and safe pedestrian crossings. And once we get used to traveling in a certain way with a certain means of transport, it really becomes a habit and we don't think about it very much. Well, unless you are a researcher in transport like myself. So think about the places you need to travel to in your daily life. Perhaps not so much now in lockdown, but before the pandemic. When you had to go to work, to college or university, or take your kids to school, go shopping, visit friends, go to parks and green spaces, do you need to travel out of your neighborhood to access these places? And what transport options do you have when you need to travel? Are all these options, assuming you have more than one, reasonably safe, accessible, convenient, and affordable to you? Consider, for example, that 53% of all commutes to work in Bristol are made by car. This vicious cycle of car dependence means that more people driving makes other transport options worse. Public transport loses passengers and investment. Walking and cycling become less pleasant and safe. And so, again, go back to the image on my slide. There is too much traffic for Billy to walk to school, so we drive him. But although our travel behavior has been influenced in favor of driving, it can be changed, and in fact, it already has. I will get back to this point shortly, but now I want to focus on the third point of my talk, the harmful impacts of planning cities and neighborhoods for the movement of cars. Next slide, please. So motorized vehicles powered by conventional fuels such as petrol and diesel contribute to carbon emissions and climate change. According to the Bristol One City Climate Strategy, I think you're familiar with this one, transport accounts for 34% of the average Bristol resident's carbon footprint. So in the image on the slide, you can see how dirty different means of transport are according to how much carbon dioxide they emit, which is represented by the black balloons. So from walking and cycling with no carbon emissions, you go through the internal combustion engine vehicle, which is by far the worst. But whatever the power source, vehicles occupy space. So the green footprints in that image represent the space that the vehicles or the means of transport occupy. And so there is an electric car there without the black balloon, but it doesn't really perform very well in terms of space consumption. And apart from carbon emission and space consumption, there are other many harmful impacts of vehicles. Road casualties, traffic congestion, air pollution, noise, physical inactivity, poor health and quality of life, and loss of green spaces and biodiversity. But there is another very damaging consequence of planning a city and its neighborhood around the notion that most people drive. It creates and reinforces social inequalities and perpetuates injustice because the burdens and costs to society associated with motor vehicles are not equitably distributed, but fall predominantly on those who are already disadvantaged. Next slide, please. Research shows that if you have access to a car, you get a competitive advantage. On average, it makes you more likely to improve your life chances, such as finding and keeping a job, being able to socialize, and accessing essential services such as healthcare and food shops. So, are all of those who don't or can't drive doomed? Oh, no, of course not. Some of them might not need a car, maybe because they live in neighborhoods where they have access to most services and have good public transport connections. For example, look at the slide. 57% of households in the central Bristol ward don't have a car. But look, for example, at Lawrence Hill, where the proportion of household without a car is 56%, and Hartcliffe and Withywood with 41%. Why is that? These neighborhoods have some of the highest levels of deprivation in Bristol. And look at Stoke Bishop. Only 12% of households in Stoke Bishop have no cars. Why? People in the most deprived areas of Bristol are far less likely to own and drive a car and far more likely to walk or use public transport in the least deprived than people in the least deprived areas. And residents in areas of high level of deprivation also have on average fewer opportunities to access jobs, healthcare and green space. They have worse air pollution and a disproportionate level of traffic injuries. UE researchers found that it is the wealthiest in our society who pollute the most and the poorest who get polluted the most. And if your income is low or insecure, perhaps you work in the gig economy or don't have a secure job, but you need the car to go to work and you still manage to run the car and just about pay your bills, then you're very vulnerable to sudden changes in fuel prices and other costs associated to driving. My message is that a car-dependent society is environmentally unsustainable and socially unjust. Next slide, please. I want to conclude with a positive note. We can change our cities and neighborhoods in a way that facilitates healthy, sustainable, and equitable transport and travel behaviors. Research shows that neighborhoods offering good quality housing, shops, local services, and public transport connections have lower levels of driving and higher use of sustainable transport, they are also more equitable. Investment in the working environment, for example, improving the public realm, reducing vehicle speeds and reallocating space away from cars and to people are particularly cost effective and beneficial. Next slide, please. And so this is my final slide. This is Queen Square before and after the redevelopment. This shows you what happens when you design a place that invites vehicles and when you change it into a place that invites people. Next slide, please. Thank you very much for listening, and I look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much, Miriam, for that presentation. So I'm just going to give you 30 seconds now just to note down any thoughts you've got from Miriam's presentation and any questions before we move on to our second speaker.